Hello everyone and welcome back to the Retro Recall. I hope you're doing awesome. Today we have this beautiful AOpen KF45A tower that we had rescued from e-waste. This is part of the second video I believe we had on the e-waste series that had the 3 towers. And so we've been tackling one by one, getting them up and running, getting them restored, which is just an amazing story. I'm loving the comments, I'm loving the interaction, and most of all, your memories you're sharing when you had these types of systems. So it's really, really awesome. So today I figured we would go ahead and dig right into this computer and find out, I don't remember exactly what was on this system, but I do see a missing drive here, and I mean, it's pretty plain. So I imagine the system itself is pretty plain. Again, that's based on your perspective, of course. So I figured we would add a couple drives and some hardware, maybe upgrades. We'll see what happens as we dig into this computer. So that said, let's get right to it. Okay, we have our case all set up on the bench here, and again, these cases were fairly common in the late 90s, early 2000s. I know personally I had had a few of these as well. So let's go ahead and just open up the side of the case and see what we're getting into. See if we can jog our memories on this computer. So I'm looking here and I see a fairly basic motherboard that would have been sold at the time. I'm observing I don't have any drives, as we had said earlier, in terms of the optical drives. I'm not seeing a hard drive in this system. So again, when they threw it to e-waste, pretty smart, getting rid of your equipment, getting rid of your drives in fear of data loss and getting out there, depending on what you had in your computer. And yeah, I mean, we have our processor here. So I believe it's PGA 370, which would either be a Pentium 3 or Celeron type of interface here. We have our Breakout cable I see here, which I believe, yeah, for serial. We have a couple of add-on cards. We do have 3 expansion cards for PCI. We also have an AMR slot here. That's the audio modem riser, which was kind of a thing that came in with Intel boards. Intel-based boards. This is an AOpen MX3W motherboard. It seems that it has onboard audio and onboard video based on the I/O ports on the outside. So let's just go ahead and start digging into this computer. We're going to take everything apart as we usually do, just to kind of get an overview of what's inside this computer, and also just, you know, clean everything, get everything up and running. But yeah, I mean, if it has onboard audio and onboard video, we'll obviously see what kind of video this has, as well as what kind of audio. And I mean, I have lots of expansion cards and things like that. It'll be good to maybe upgrade this a little bit and throw an OS on it to see how it works in terms of performance. Yeah, so let's just get right to it here. So I think what we'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and just remove the power from the actual motherboard itself. I do notice that the power supply as well is quite dirty. I mean, they generally are. One thing I like about this power supply, it has the fan on the bottom as well here, an intake fan. Usually the power supplies are blocked here, had it here and here, like the input here and the output going up back of the case. But I loved having this here as well because it just promotes additional cooling inside the computer, which is great. So let's go ahead and just remove the RAM from here. So hopefully it's just 128 megs of SD RAM. Again, it doesn't clearly mark it, but I'm going by the model that's on this particular chip. So we'll go ahead and just put that aside for now. And the same thing with these cards. So we're just going to go ahead and remove the PCI expansion cards just to kind of get them out of the way here as well. Not that they're in the way, but it's just part of the process. So we'll see what is in these. Now, generally, I like to keep what I find in the e-waste system part of the e-waste system. I don't like to add to my pile of components. I like to utilize what I have because, I mean, I'll get systems that are literally crushed or the motherboard is cracked in half or, you know, things like that where I recycle that part of it and then just save the cards from it because you never know if the card is going to work or not. So here we have is just a standard modem, and I'm just trying to see what model it is on it, and I'm not seeing any model other than a PC-Tel chipset. So my guess would be either a 33.6 or a 56K modem, probably 56K based on the year and when it came out, probably in 99, 2000 era. That's my guess. But so my guess would be that would be a 56K modem, but again, without actually looking up the chipset. But hopefully if we throw it back in there, that the computer will detect it, and yeah, we'll go from there. We won't have much trouble with that. Let's go ahead and remove this next card. Let's see what this is. This is, okay, so it is a LAN card. D-Link is written right on the back, engraved on the back with our friendly neighborhood spiderwebs as well, so that's always a good time. And we have a DFE 530TX. I believe this is a 10100 card. I believe... I don't think these are gigabit cards. So again, just pretty run-of-the-mill when it came to the system. I mean, nothing too fancy there. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and remove that breakout cable as well. I believe this is a serial. It adds support for serial-based devices or communication and things like that. If you had a serial mouse converting from a Windows 95 based machine to Windows 98, I know PS2 it's capable here. And I mean, it was just boards were coming out so quickly that they were supporting older systems as well, which was really good for the market, for their own competing, but also trying to get ahead by saying, okay, this is optional. You don't have to have this. We have PS2 here instead of using a serial-based port, but also on the system itself, it also has one built on the board. So it supports two in this particular case. And then we have our CPU. Let's go ahead and just pull that off there. And there we are. And which is our CPU cooler, which is, not too bad in terms of flexibility. And I mean, the fan seems to be pretty good. Generally, when you spin it like this, I mean, it spins freely, but then it just kind of grabs again like that. Generally, the bearing's still pretty good in it. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how that operates. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the CPU here to see what we have. In terms of CPU, ALC, the company's still around. I know. Oh, here we go. Celeron 400 megahertz CPU. And again, they were pretty common. And so it even adds in more in my budget conversation I was having earlier is, these systems tended to be, let me just make sure I get this in right. I don't want to bend any pins or put it in backwards. But yeah, so the Celeron seem to be more of the entry-level CPUs, the more affordable to give you more performance versus their Pentium 3 counterparts. However, in my experience, you could do a lot with the Celeron processors in terms of overclocking and doing different things with them that really helped, overperform their counterparts. So again, I for a budget CPU, there was a lot of nicknames for those particular processors, but I'll tell you, I had a couple growing up and I had no problems with them. So it was good. Maybe I was the underdog, or maybe I was the one-off case. Let me know in the comments if you had Celeron processors and if it's something that you enjoyed using, or you were able to overclock well, or you didn't have any issues with. Of course, everybody wanted to have the Pentium 3 and all those things, but again, it was just I didn't find it to be a bad processor. So let's go ahead and just pop out the front lights and all those good things, the power switch and the reset switch, because it is an ATX power supply, so that's all controlled through there. And then we'll take our motherboard out. Not seeing too many issues with this system so far, which is really nice. Generally, the E-Way systems we've been working on have had, just in our last video, don't need that. In our last video, we, the mounting bracket for the CPU cooler was completely off the board, and that was a broken screw. And then there were some other issues with the system. So it's nice to get something like this that, we still have to clean it. We still have to get it up and running. Obviously it was tossed. The whoever owned it was done with the system. So I'm not seeing any issues with any capacitors. I am seeing, we have a capacitor that's a little bent here, but again, that could have been just from somebody bumping into it when putting in the CPU cooler, or potentially some memory there. So we'll get that, just take a close look at it and make sure it's good. So I'm not seeing it. Oh, there we go. It was just stuck on there. There we are. We have our motherboard. A good look at our motherboard here. So it's an AOpen motherboard. As I said, the MX3W. And there's our I/O shields. We have our game port, our audio. So that would be like the equivalent of a sound card. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember what the audio is on this, but definitely built on. The video built on, though, based on what I understand, is the Intel i752 chipset. So it's one of the entry-level chipsets that actually had graphics built on, which is, boards started to become more streamlined, more budget, and they started doing that more and more. And, there was a lot of debate about that because, they had dedicated video cards, which were high-performance video cards, dedicated graphics, and, you could, through expansion do the same thing. But then they started becoming more and more powerful over the years, where onboard graphics started becoming more of the norm as opposed to the exception. So unless you were a gamer that requires specific things, these tended to do pretty well. And depending on the benchmarks you look at, there's definitely some benchmarks and reports out there on this particular chipset did very well in terms of performance, and for what you were running. So, for gaming and things like that. Mind you, you're not going to do huge 3D graphics with this and OpenGL and all those good things. But again, it was just something that, for convenience and could stand the test of time, as we went through. We have our LPT port, one serial port. We have two, obviously, with the breakout, our USB support and our PS2 support. So looking at the capacitors here, I'm not seeing anything that is leaking or bulging. You just take a fine-tooth comb, so to speak, with your eyes and take a look. And that was the one that I thought was kind of bent, but it only bends left and right, so it's just the way it's soldered into the board. So I don't think there's going to be any issues with that one. Same thing with down here. These little guys here are looking pretty good. They look like happy capacitors there. That's good. All right, let's put that aside. And the last couple things here, let's go ahead and take out our floppy drive. Now, why are we taking the floppy drive? It's pretty simple. There's nothing fancy about it. Well, it's just good to get it out of the system. And, this one didn't have two screws on it, just the one. But I like to get them out of the system so we can just do a cleanup of it, get all the dirt out of it. And, again, I haven't tested this at all outside of just when we had turned on the system. It's a Panasonic, just your standard entry-level floppy drive. there's nothing fancy about those. And the last thing we'll do is just take out this power supply, because I am going to take it out to the garage as we did the other one and give it a good cleaning in terms of the air compressor using that. I just find it works very well. And of course, in the garage is more conducive to, the dirt and dust and everything flying out of it, as opposed to all over the office here and getting this all, getting the dirt everywhere. And I'm forever cleaning it after the fact. It's already gets dirty enough with everything that we do here, so it's good to do that. Now, this power supply, it shows it's a 200-watt power supply. Now, my understanding is that the AOpen cases came with AOpen power supply, so this may be a replacement power supply to the original case. And sticker's falling off there. It's old enough. But yeah, I like this power supply just because of the intake on the bottom. But Sunny Technologies, I haven't heard of them. It says ATX 375, but that might be completely misleading, because you used to look at that and go, oh, it's 375 watts. No, it says peak output is 200-watt power supply. So we'll just take that out of there. Again, that can mean nothing. It's just where my brain goes when I go ahead and see something like that. Okay, so we have our system completely apart on the bench here, and we just have our tower. So the next thing we're going to do is just move the tower off the bench, as we usually do, and start working on the different components, getting them all nice and cleaned up. Okay, and we're back on the bench with everything kind of set up here. We have our motherboard out, our anti-static mat, of course, which we always use. I love all these spider webs and dirt and all that great stuff. And we have the usual suspects, our ESD brushes. That way there's no buildup of static as you're using them on the board and potentially damage any of the board. We have our isopropyl alcohol at 70% spray. Again, I do have 99%. 70% just takes longer to dissipate, and it's in a spray bottle, so it's much easier for me to use. Our toothbrush to get in all those nice little nooks and crannies, and then we have our wipes as well, our alcohol-based wipes on this, and just start to clean off the gunk from this board. And always around the CPU is where I notice the most gunk and dirt. only because of the fact that the fan is always running in this area. And again, it just always sucks in the dirt from anything of the environment around it. And I mean, dust is dust, right? So just good to get the heavier stuff off using this. You can see it all coming out of the bench. And again, I just love doing this. I love showing this to you guys and restoring these old systems and keeping them out of the junkyard. Again, not knowing what I'm going to do with them all. I have quite a few. And as I'm getting them all cleaned up, I'm just labeling them with what is inside of them, what we've decided to build with them. For now, I'd like to keep them just in case we do a future video where we want to do a test of some sort of components or do a review on something that requires that sort of era of PC. And the nice thing about the e-waste stuff that we get is we have that ability to do that, where we can actually go and use that legitimate hardware from that era. And now we're going to go ahead and give it a nice alcohol bath. We'll just do a spray all over here. Again, I just like doing this to get all the corners all kind of cleaned up. And, this doesn't hurt the board at all in any sort of form. And I like to do it just so it gets in all those areas that the brush doesn't get for whatever reason. But yeah, that's looking pretty darn good. I mean, a little bit more dirt came off of it though, but I mean, that's to be expected. And yeah, it's looking really nice here now. And what I want to do is just get that cleaned out there. And I did take first thing I'll do is just get that last bit of dirt there that we uncovered off the soldering mat here. And there we are. Again, just like to keep that clean. And we'll use the other side of the wipe here just to get any sort of other dust that, again, the toothbrush, again, when I'm using a toothbrush, I'm always using the soft bristles. So always keep that in mind so it doesn't do any damage to anything. And while we're here, I'm just going to right away, because I continue not to do this, I'm going to take off that battery right from the system here. If I can find there we are. Just going to find my flathead. And yeah, I just want to pop that off just because we're already here. It's there in front of me. We may as well just take it off while we're here. So let's go ahead and change over to our next card. All right, our next card, again, pretty unremarkable in terms of technology now, but back in the day, it was quite important. Are these modems? I mean, this is a 56K modem. Yes, this computer had Ethernet, but not everybody had the ability to connect to the internet via high speed. I mean, we had this for quite a while before DSL came out, and with DSL, it granted the people to have faster high speed or slower high-speed internet, well, faster than dial-up. And I was one of those early adopters that we experienced DSL through Ethernet, and just thought that was quite awesome, being able to have that functionality, that feature set. So a nice new shiny card. We're going to put that aside as we always do up here. Then we have our Ethernet card. Again, very handy to have an Ethernet card in these computers because you never know when you might need one. And where, the newer systems, as time went by, had Ethernet, just like the video, just like the audio, Ethernet built into the board. So I having these breakouts and things like that are really good. I love personally when they're built on board. I mean, Ethernet's Ethernet in my eyes. Unless you're doing higher end networking, you're starting to combine cards and bridge them and all that stuff. But I mean, for the sake of what, this system is in this era, it wouldn't have required a lot of that. So there we are. Let's just get this wiped off. I mean, again, there's nothing fancy about this floppy drive. It's just your standard 3.5 inch, 1.44 megabyte drive. But it's just good to get this kind of all wiped off, cleaned up. And again, we're going to do the rest with the system anyway. So we may as well clean it up. And if we test this doesn't work, we can always take it apart and get it all kind of cleaned up and find out what's going on. Maybe clean the head, all that good stuff. So that's it. I mean, pretty standard drive, pretty standard process to get kind of cleaned up there. Okay, and we have our CPU cooler, our usual suspect again, which is full of dirt and gunk and all the wrong things you want in a fan. So I'm going to go ahead and just take out these screws. Okay, so we have the 4 screws removed. There we are. And yeah, I mean, that's caked pretty well there. Yeah, you can see all the dirt and gunk and all that stuff. But if you've watched any of my videos already, you know that won't be too long. So I'm going to go ahead and just use the wipes to clean off the screws, just because on the bottom of the screws are hooked to quite a bit of dirt there. So let's go ahead and get that cleaned up there. We'll do the same thing here. We're just going to get the dirt off from the inside of the fan, and I'm holding on to the fan while I'm doing this, the actual fan blades themselves, so I'm able to get them without them turning all over the place. But also, I'm not doing any damage to the bearing or anything like that. And I'll turn it as I feel I need it, and then that way it's not the fan or the brush doing any damage to the fan. And I'll just go in here with this just to be 100% sure. See, there's a little bit of dirt still coming out of there. So, I mean, how far do you want to go with this? I mean, depending on how long this runs, it'll be, some dirt will be in there again. But hey, let's give it a fighting chance anyway. There we are. I'm pretty confident this fan worked and everything worked in the system, but I mean, look at that. It's just night and day now. I mean, in terms of a cooler. And I know you can get these online on Amazon or whatever, but why not use what you have until you can't? That's the bracket. So I'll keep it in this direction, this orientation for now. Okay, let's go ahead and just take all that dirt out of there. Genius, look at it all. So much. But that's okay. I mean, that's what we're here to do. Try to get all that dirt out of there, and it doesn't seem to. My brush, I should say, isn't long enough. So let me see if we can use a longer one here. There we are. That got a little deeper into the fins. Yeah, that got to the bottom there. That's good. And we're just going to do a quick spray there. And do a final kind of wipe down there as well. Just to get the surface stuff off there. Oh, it's looking just so much better. Look at that. It's just awesome. Okay, we'll put that back in there as well, just like so. And we'll put our fan back on. And I mean, I don't remember the orientation on the board, I believe, was like this. So I remember taking that off there. So let's go ahead and put the cooler. We'll probably put it this way because, I think the actual on the board itself, I think it's a double check here. I just want to be absolutely sure we're good. Yeah, it's in the top corner there. So, what I could do is actually this, and then that way it kind of just loops in, and just that way for cable management as well, gives us a better suit for that. Okay, let's put these 4 screws back on. There, we have our heatsink all cleaned up, and we are good to go there. There, I just checked all 4 screws, and there we are. Perfectly clean heatsink, and you never know. Okay, so we have our nice power supply all blown out and cleaned out, which is great. So that, that's good news. So we'll put that aside as well. So we're going to throw that in the tower when it comes time. And so the second last thing I should say, is the case itself. So I'm going to go ahead and get some supplies so we can go ahead and get this all kind of cleaned up in terms of scuffing and all that good stuff. Okay, here we are with our trusted magic eraser, and we have some water, of course, and our rags, which I use just to clean up these cases. So, I mean, there's not a lot on this. I mean, there's some dents and scratches in the paint, but I find that these magic erasers do really well for any sort of scuffs or marks in the paint. I mean, I've used all different types of chemicals and things like that, and I just find that these work extremely well. I mean, this is a pretty decent looking case here, so doesn't seem to be too bad there. Let's give it a quick wipe there with the rag. And I'm just using water because, I mean, by the time we actually go to build the system back, it'll be gone. And I mean, there's nothing harmful on it by doing it this way. And there we go. We have that side panel all good to go. Okay, here's our second panel. This is on the other side. This will be the same side as the motherboard back part. So we'll get that cleaned up as well. Look, that just comes right off. That one just came right off. That's really awesome when that happens there. It just makes the case look that much better. I mean, I can't do anything about the marks and the paint unless you go to repaint the case itself. So a good wipe. And it's good to get all that dirt off. Any dust bunnies that are hanging out that, as they always say, are not invited to this party. All right, we have that done. And now let's get our tower. That's going to be our star of our show because that's the one that is the dirtiest. Just going to remove the mat here. We don't need that out. And then here we are. So we have our case full of dirt, which is fine. I mean, that's what we're here to do. We're here to clean all of it off and get it into a good spot here. So that said, let's just get in here right away. No, don't hold anything back and get this kind of all cleaned out. And we'll kind of move forward on this in the video. So there's nothing on this side that we need to worry about. But on the front of the case, we do have quite a bit of scuffs and marks that just came right out there, no problem. So there we are. We have the front of the case looking really nice. And we'll do the same thing here. Make sure I'm not doing any damage to the components that are laying on the side over there. I mean, the top of the tower. I mean, it's just your standard dirt. So we have our case all cleaned out. Looking quite nice, if I do say so myself. All cleaned up inside. And that's what we're looking for. Making sure we get to a good space with everything and get it all ready for getting us into putting everything back together. So I think the very first thing we're going to do is install that power supply, just because, I mean, a couple times I've been installing it after the fact, and that's fine, but I think for what we're trying to do and do things a little proper, we'll get that power supply installed first. So we'll get our 4 screws. So I remember talking about that earlier, and these are pretty standard case screws. We'll get that installed. All right, we have our 4 screws in. Let's do a final tighten on all 4. We have that. And we are in a good space there. So we're just going to take all these wires and put them all inside up top here until we're ready to start dealing with them. Just because we want to make sure that we have all the working room we require for the actual motherboard installation there. Okay, the fun part. Let's put everything back together. So we have our motherboard here, which is going to slide back in. And I mean, I have the advantage where all the standoffs are already where they need to be. Generally, when you're building a brand new PC, you would have it in such a way that you'd line up where your screws go and all that good stuff. But the nice thing about this, where we took it apart, we already know where everything goes. So, okay, so our motherboard's in. That's nice and tight. It's not going anywhere. And I mean, there's different ways you can attack this, right? Different ways you can decide to, what you put in next. I may pop the drives in next just to get them kind of out of the way. So I'm going to move all these wires out of the way here. And we can start connecting those afterwards. So I'm going to pop out the second breakout plastic, which is right here. We got that out of the case. And it does have a metal breakout in the front here, which I'm going to just grab onto and twist. Again, that's only because there's never been a second drive in here. So we'll just take that out of there. Okay, so the very first drive we're going to put in is going to be a burner. And I'm using 2 LG drives just because they match. So it's nice to do that. And I'm going to put the burner on the bottom. I always like putting the CD-ROM drive on top. Other people have commented that, I like to put it on the bottom and all that stuff. But I mean, I don't see a problem with it either way. I just like using it to be on the top and the CD-ROM on top and the bottom. In my mind, I'm copying, if you were going to back up, a CD or something, that you're copying from one to the other. And yeah, this is the way I look at it, but everybody's different. So you do you and what you want to do. So go ahead and get some screws here so we can get that all ready to go. Okay, we got those 2 in. We have those 2 in, and we'll flip it around the other side. But before I do that, let's go ahead and check the master and slave settings on the back of the drives. Okay, and we're back, and we have the master set for the CD-ROM drive, the slave set for the CD burner, and we have on the other side, I was able off camera to get the other screws mounted, so we're looking really good in the front. We have the two drives mounted in the system now. So I think the next thing we'll do is just pop in that floppy drive as well, just because we have it, and we'll throw that in there. There we are, and we'll get those screws put in as well. Okay, so we have our floppy screws in there, and now we can start to populate the system and get this, get these guys all connected and get everything kind of looked after in terms of what we can do for cable management the best we can. And I'm using that term extremely loosely because I'm not spending a lot of time with these systems, just outside of getting everything connected. So we'll go ahead and pop in the main ATX power. There we are. We have that in there. We need some IDE cables here, so we'll get those all ready to go. And we also need a floppy drive controller, or floppy drive cable. We'll get that out. And one thing I just forgot, actually, just while we're sitting here looking at everything, is the hard drive. So we're going to throw in a Maxter 120 gigabyte hard drive here as well. It is IDE. We're going to pop that in there. Forgot to mention that we had that, but did not install. So we'll get that installed in this system. Okay, so our hard drive is all mounted here, which is great. And we have our hard drive, floppy drive, and our CD drive and burner. We have the power connected here. So let's just go ahead and get the IDE, brand new IDE cable out. The system did not have any. So we'll just give it some love. You know, that we have our system all nice and cleaned up. We may as well use these. And these, you can still get these no problem online. So again, just nice having them. And I like the longer ones because, you know, it gets them out of the way where you need to go. So we have our IDE 1 connected. That's going to be for our hard disk drive. And then we'll do it again. And this will be for our IDE 2 will be for our optical drives. Okay, so we have our IDE connected there. And we'll go here for our master and slave. There we are. We have our IDE cables in there hooked up. It's nice. We'll just wrap that under the hard drive there for looks. And then we'll also connect the hard drive here as well. Okay, so we have that hooked up now. Let's get some of our power cables installed. This is just a spare for what we need. So we're just going to pop that up there, kind of hide it out of the way. And so we'll take one here. And I'm just looking at the different leads that we have here. So do the same thing. We'll clean it up after. The nice thing, again, as I noted, this case has, or this power supply has the fan here, the intake as well. So any sort of power management that's blocked, or sorry, power that's blocked, we have the ability to cool from underneath as well. So it gives you that nice ability there. Okay, so we have the drives connected there. We're going to pop on the heatsink and fan just because I feel that's next. And before we do that, I keep on forgetting. I don't know why I forget every time. I'll go ahead and put on some thermal grease here. I'll put some of the dye there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and pop in the heatsink. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. Nothing fancy. Again, pretty good there. And we'll pop on the power supply to the fan on the heatsink. There we are. We have that installed, which is great. Now that's out of the way, we can run our floppy. So we'll go ahead and just pop in this to the header as well. I believe it goes on this way here. There we are. Sure enough, it does. And we'll just slide that in there nicely in between the drives. Okay, we have that in there. And we'll do is just put that like this. And we'll just put a little elastic around it that I had just to keep everything kind of, oh, the elastic broke there. That's not going to work. So we'll just use one of these guys here. Okay, see, it's just nice and clean. Just keeps the cable off the board and what have you. Let's pop the memory in there now. One thing I'll do is get some deoxit, as we always do, and just to make sure there's some in that slot. So we'll go ahead and just open up bank 1. And I believe that is, yep, okay. And we'll pop it in. If we have any memory errors, we know what to do. So hopefully everybody can see what I'm doing there. I know I'm kind of in the way there. There. Okay, so we have the RAM installed, we have the CPU cooler installed with our thermal grease, we have our floppy cable. Let's just get power to the floppy drive and to the IDE drive. Turn that around. There we are. Same thing here. Perfect. We have the hard drive installed now. All the cables are out of the way of the board. Lots of airflow going on here, which is great. This is not a super fancy board. It's not going to have a lot of heat distribution that it has to worry about. So I'm not too worried about that. Okay, let's go ahead and get the cards in. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to install this sound card. I have lots of these. I have 6 or 7 of these cards. Sound Blaster Live cards, model CT4670. I figured this will be better than the onboard audio that we have, which is showing as an AC97. I would think that the Sound Blaster Live card is a little better than what we have in terms of the audio on board, and so I'm going to just install it because we have the cards, so why not use them? And I'll just disable the onboard audio. At least I'll hopefully remember doing that this time. That's what gave us our conflicts in our last video. But yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Okay, so we have that on there, and we'll pop in our audio card in the top PCI slot because that one was unpopulated. And we'll just pop in a little case screw here as well. There, that's in there. And I don't have any audio cables to go from the optical drives. They're out of order. I know I'm building all these systems. I don't have that ability. Pretty straightforward to pop them in if needed. I am going to put in the modem and the network card just because. I literally just because it was already part of this system. So I am doing that anyway. All right. Okay, we have that installed. Let's go ahead and get the front headers all hooked up now. Okay, so our headers are all installed there now on the board. It's always great taking a picture of that stuff. That way you have an easy reference to install. So the only thing that's left to do is hooking up our coin cell battery, which we have a brand new one here. So we'll go ahead and open it up here and pop that in this socket. There, it's in. So let's do a recap here before we start to get everything ready. So we've gone ahead and completely dismantled this computer. We determined it's an Intel Celeron 400 with 128 mega RAM. At least that's my idea. We installed a 120 megabyte hard drive, our floppy drive, and our 2 optical drives, one being a CD burner and one not. We have our 200 watt power supply, which has nice open fan support under here. I'm just going to move this wire a little bit. I feel like I don't want any vibration. Actually, it shouldn't cause any trouble there. I just want to make sure there's nothing going to interfere. We installed a Sound Blaster Live card. We have also our modem, which I think is a 56K modem. And then we have our LAN card as well. So, I mean, overall, we have a beautiful, clean, mean machine here. So let's go ahead and get the bench all tidied up and see if this machine will fire up for the new first time. And here we are, and we're back to the bench with our beautiful looking restored KF45A case that we did some modifications to. You know, there's our 2 drives that we've installed. And my goodness, does it ever look much better, all cleaned up. And this has no yellowing at all, at least not enough to be able to, you know, write home about, as the expression goes. And I mean, we have our trusted HP monitor here. I mean, just looking at this case wants me to dig out, you know, a higher end CRT monitor and really, you know, experience just the nostalgia that this gives me. So, but yeah, so we have our keyboard, our mouse set up, and all those good things. Our power bar is on. Let's go ahead and flip the ATX power supply just to see if we have any of that magic smoke pop out. So nothing came out there. That's a good sign. Let's make sure that we connected everything inside and see if we get post. Lights are coming on, no problem. Okay. That to me sounds like a memory error. We all know my luck with memory. Okay, let's go ahead and get that fixed up there. Let's turn this off. All right, we have that, and let's go ahead and get that fixed up. Okay, I've gone ahead and got that reseated. Let's see if that works. One beep, great sign. All right, let's hit pause here and see what we have. So we have our Celeron 400 processor, which is what we anticipated to have based on what we saw in the system. We also have our 128 meg stick, but a meg shows a meg is shared memory. My imagination tells me that it is the video card that's stealing some of that stuff, but we'll take a look. And then talks about the memory latency. I love the AOpen boards. I love the splash screens. Okay, let's go into setup. I know it's detecting IDE drives. Let's just go into setup real quickly and just see where everything is. Okay, that hard drive is just not spinning at all. I'm wondering if there's an issue with that power going to the hard drive, or if the actual drive is dead. But I'm going to go ahead and just swap the Molex in the back to see if that gives us a better idea and see if that works for us. Okay, so I've gone ahead and checked. We don't have any power to any of the Molex connectors that are on this computer. So I did some testing in there with my multimeter. I'm not getting power on the 5 volt. And so my gut feeling is that power supply is toast or needs to be recapped or what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and just off camera, I'm going to go ahead and replace that power supply to see if we can get in a better spot. Something we may have done is tested prior to all that work, but that's totally fine. That's part of the troubleshooting process when rebuilding these old systems. And so I'm going to go ahead and get another power supply and get that installed in this computer. Okay, so a little different angle here, just because I wanted to bring everybody back to what we're doing. So we were able to find a AOpen power supply here that I was able to locate, and this is a 300 watt one. Again, I just hooked everything back on the system, so we're going to fire this up together. And we're back again. Isn't this fun? All right, let's go ahead and press the on button, power button, and see if this fires up. First time together. And nothing. Okay, let's go ahead and investigate that and see what happened. Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So this looks completely different than all the work we just did to get to a certain point of this video. And what was happening was we had a power supply that was allowing the system to post, the computer posted, and the drives, the hard drive, the optical drives, didn't work. For whatever reason, they just weren't working. At first, I thought it was just the hard drive that was having an issue spinning up, and then I couldn't open any one of the other drives. So then when I did a test with the multimeter, I wasn't getting any power on the, I believe it was the 5 volt rail I had indicated. I could be wrong on that. Anyway, so I then just went and got another power supply. I actually went and got 3 power supplies. I hooked up all 3 power supplies, and all gave me the same symptom. Sorry, different symptom, but all together the same thing, which was the computer no longer posted, and the red light on the motherboard didn't light up anymore. Now, that said, if you went ahead and held in the power button for about 5 seconds, it would flip on real quickly and then turn off equally as quickly. And so and the fan, the CPU fan would spin just a brief second and then turn off. So I went ahead and just took one of the good power supplies I know worked. I went ahead and jumped the power supply separately using the ATX connector on the green pin and the black pin, and I was able to turn on the power supply no problem. It ran great, no issues, no smell, nothing, no smoke. And then so I went ahead and dismantled the board from the case, thinking that maybe there was a chance of a grounding issue in the case itself. And so I took the board out and did this, and still had the lead connected to the computer, you know, for the power, the reset, the LEDs and all that. And same thing was happening. In or out of the case it was doing the same thing. So then I thought, okay, then in that case, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just remove those leads, those cables from the board completely. And my whole intention was just to tell the board to turn on and off using the power switch just by jumping the two leads there. Well, this is what happens when I turn on the power supply with it just like this. So keep in mind, I have the CPU out because I do not want any issues to happen with the power supply, or sorry, with the CPU. Now, for everyone saying, well, no, you need to have the CPU in there for this to do this, and this is why it's doing this. Well, it does the same thing with this in there. I just don't want to risk having the CPU damaged or cause any damage to the CPU. So I'll go ahead and flip this power supply and you'll see what happens. And I'm going to zoom right in on the board because I want everyone to see what happens here. And watch the light and watch the power supply, or sorry, the CPU fan itself. And now it's not doing anything. What was happening was the red light would flicker. It would go on, off, on, off, on, off, faster, faster, and faster. There it is. It's doing it now. It does that, spins up, and gets to a constant setup, constant speed. Now it's on. Fully on, fans on, everything's working great. Now, my gut feeling when I see this, I'm not going to run it like this because I don't want any damage to the power supply. But my gut feeling is that there's a short somewhere on this motherboard, or there's an issue with one of the caps on this board. I mean, given the age of the board, it's probably good to recap it. But I just need to do some troubleshooting on this physical board to see if we can get this back to life for what it is. So this symptom was potentially existing from day one, because when we first got this computer from eWaste, we had this system out. And this computer itself, we never did get it to go any further than just the initial post. We didn't have a hard drive to test. We didn't have any optical drives to test. So it would have done the same thing it did before. The only thing is we took it through progression by going through the system, by putting everything back together, by getting everything load tested and getting a proper power supply. It's possible that old power supply had an issue with it that did some damage, or there's a cap issue on this board or something else. So, let me know in the comments down below if there's anything that you can think of outside of what I mentioned in terms of caps or a potential short on the board, what you would recommend, because you saw there what happened. The case, or the motherboard actually turns on, the fan spins up, and it does go to a steady state, but it takes a bit to get to that point. Now, and it's doing it by itself. If you noticed, I didn't jump anything on the board. Like, I'm not telling it to turn on. So I don't, like, that should not happen. It should not do that until I hit the power switch on the ATX power supply. Sorry, the button on the front of the computer to tell it to turn on. And so I don't know, it might be an irreparable issue with this particular motherboard. If so, we'll do something different on another build. So yeah, just let me know below. I mean, this is definitely a turn of events. Everything is completely different than what we were doing, because I was doing a bunch of tests with the multimeter. I was testing the power supplies, because I couldn't believe that forced power supplies that I had in stock were just broken. It just completely floored me. So I had to do some testing. So my gut feeling is that there's definitely an issue with the board itself. And now it's just a matter of, do we think historically that sort of issue, if you've seen that issue, is a cap issue? It's very possible. Or there's a short on the board, and for some reason it's turning on the board. It's telling it to turn on. Now, I don't know if there's a short within this header down here for the power switch to tell it to turn on. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a bunch of troubleshooting and reading up on this board to see what I can do to fix this. But I won't necessarily do this next video. I think what we'll do is, this just prompted us to try to find another motherboard from our supply area to populate this case and get this case running. Now, this is not exactly what came with the motherboard, with whatever, or with the e-waste that I found, but it'll be a cool project for us to do. So again, if you know what happened to this system, if you've seen this before, where literally every time I turn on this power supply, it will start to flicker constantly until it comes to a steady state of power on, but nothing happens. And I'm not sure what's causing that. Nothing's getting hot on the board. I've touched all the chips in the different areas of the board, including some of the resistors, and I'm not getting any heat at all from any of this. Nothing. So I don't know what would be potentially causing that. So again, cool option for a future project to see if we can do to get this board going, because that's where my gut goes. I believe we've rescued the processor. This is a Celeron 400, as I mentioned earlier, and I do have other socket 370 boards, I believe. I just have to go look, and then in that case, we might be able to do an exact socket 370 build, which is what this was initially intended to be. So that said, if you've liked today's video, it didn't end up the way I wanted it to, but you know what? That's what's so cool about this channel, is that you never know what you're going to get. And here's a twist of us trying to get e-waste going. And we actually hit our first roadblock where, you know, system number 3 of that second e-waste video, we weren't able to get going, even though it did kind of give us a sign that we were able to get going. So if you liked today's video, please give it a thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. Give me some suggestions. I really appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. And again, thank you for spending time with me, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.